Two, one.
Man, I love that opening. Sorry. I just really like that. That is some cool stuff. Thank you for doing that for us, Connie. And the music is just like boom.
Man, I
I
know.
enjoy
That's
that.
from the link that you gave me. And I hated those ones that you gave me. I was like, man, I got to find something good.
Oh, you didn't like the music I sent you? Is
No,
that?
I wrote you and I said I don't like that one. I didn't like
Oh,
any of them. And then I
well, they're
found
kind of
one.
well. Okay, you get what you pay for.
Yuck.
That's the whole purpose of changing the music is so you wouldn't get somebody going. Oh, we got copyright on the kafir. We got to get him off the air. We got to stop what he's
Mhm.
saying. And the only way that you can do it is
Free music.
yeah. There you go. So
Yes.
go ahead and bite it. All right, so welcome to the show, everybody. As you noticed, I didn't open up with my normal Radio Kafiristan, Kufar Akbar. I've decided that we're just going to start and just, to keep people from getting confused, just have it the Cross and the Crescent on Sunday afternoons and the Cross and the Crescent on Tuesday evenings. Now, I know we didn't take a vote on this, but I would like to think that I still hold veto authority here, although some days I'm not so sure about that based on how some of these shows go, but that's okay. All right, so today what we're going to do is we are going to continue to look at the issue of apostasy that we obviously are completely clueless about, even when we are citing original Islamic sources about what's to happen to apostates. Evidently, that we are ignorant of all what modern Western scholarship says about killing people who leave the religion of Islam. And the bottom line is that despite all the fluff, the puff, the three witnesses, the trials, the date that 3 days or what, despite all of that, the fact is that if somebody publicly professes that they have left Islam, they are considered an apostate, and according to the Sharia, the Islamic law, they are to be killed. But tonight we're going to take it from a different angle. And Issa had brought this up on Sunday, and I appreciate him thinking outside of the box or inside of the box, but just going to a different corner. Uh, we're going to talk about okay, so those who do publicly apostatize from Islam, what happens to them? What happens to those recent converts outside of Islam? Are they embraced by the rest of the world? Does their family support them? And then maybe we can juxtapose that and take a look at what happens to Christians who apostatize from Christianity. And then once we get done doing that, I know this is a lot. It's only two steps, folks. Okay, there's two more to go. We're going to total four. We'll look at how do new converts to Islam act? What do they do when they convert to Islam? And number two, what did Christians, new Christians who profess Christ as their Lord and Savior, how do they act? So we're going to take a look at 4 different areas tonight, but I wanted to first turn it over to Isa because he told me that he was going to did I instant message you or text you today, Isa, about that? I just wanted to make sure that we were still going to be 5 by 5 at 5 Central Time. I know you're in Eastern Standard Time, but it's 5 here, so I can get away with saying that. So, how are you?
Well, I'm good. Thank you for asking, sir. I appreciate it.
You're looking good. You got a lot of hair hanging out from underneath your hat. Might want to tuck that in there.
I
I mean,
know.
hold on, maybe I can.
Yeah,
you
my
here.
hair is a
Wait, all
little,
right,
my
let me
hair's a
get
little
this
wild.
out, though. But I don't have hair to hang out though. And if I did, it would be gray. I went fishing today, and the guy that I went fishing with has a ponytail, and I don't get down on people about having ponytails, men with long hair or such. But I asked him, I said, why do you have a ponytail? And it was pretty simple. He's like, most people hate it. I'm like, why? But that's you just got to understand some of the people that I hang with. But anyway, all right, Isa, you and your hat, your hair, you're still a good looking dude. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. I actually grew out my hair to donate to cancer patients. That's why it grows out long, because I donate it.
Well, then you got him, because he had no interest in donating that ponytail of his. I can tell you that right now.
And I donate blood. I do a lot of that stuff. So, thank you. Blessings to all today. I think this is a really serious issue that's going on. Regardless of what people feel about Islam, if Islam is good or not good, I'm not going to say anything about that particular thing, but there is a political thing that's very problematic that's existing in our time, and I think we need to speak up against these types of issues. And that's the issue of the trauma that ex-Muslims are engaging with. It's very difficult, it's very hard, and it's very sad. And so there's certain kind of, I want to look at scholarly articles that we could engage and look at these types of things, because I think we as a human society, it's not about whatever religion you are, we're in a human society. These are things that we need to engage and be like, this is not okay. We don't want this in our society. We don't want people who choose, if whether you're an ex-Christian or an ex-Muslim, we don't want you to, if you decide to choose a different faith, that you will face any persecution. You want to forgive those who persecute you. But that's important too. But the thing is that we want to establish the situation that murder of any sort is wrong. Any oppression is wrong. These are things that we have to understand. So the first element is we need to look at the Pew Research. I don't know if you can share that on the screen or if I should share it. I don't know how that works. Should I share it?
Yeah, you can share your stuff. I just have to put it up on the screen for you. We had this guy UA. He became a subscriber. He was here on Sunday. I think that's kind of an interesting comment he makes there. I felt safer on an openly ex-Muslim working in Jeddah, which is in Saudi Arabia, for 5 years than I currently do being back home in West London. That is frightening. To tell you that's that's some scary stuff. Kelly Powers is here. Thank you, Kelly, for coming. I appreciate that. Dragon, of course, and Darcy, Nim. Thank you all for coming. It's glad to see you here. All right, Isa, there's your screen.
Okay, so let's take a look at this type of situation. This is those who leave Islam offset by those who become Muslim. So there's this kind of myth that's going on, because it's important that we're trying to convey truth to the best of our ability. All of us, God willing, that's what we're trying to do, right? The point is that we look and we can see in this article that there's this element that was this idea that everybody is just coming and becoming Muslim. I'm not sure that's even an important idea that certain people hold on to, that people are like, everybody needs to become Muslim and there are Muslim. But factually, this is not really a true statement, as we can see here in this particular engagement. Pew Research is a very kind of well-sourced, documented place to go. And we can see, so this is first kind of establishing what the landscape looks like here. It says that a quarter of adults who are raised Muslim no longer identify as members of the faith. It's the same share as those who are raised as Christian. So this is like a human thing. But while the share of American Muslim adults who are converts to Islam also is about 23%. So it's pretty equivalent. Those who are coming out are those who are coming in. In other words, it's saying that there's a little bit of a element between Christianity, the loss that Christianity has, but I don't think that's the important part here. But we can see that a lot of the former Muslims who have left Islam they don't believe, they're an atheist or agnostic, and then they're Christian or something else. So we see a lot of people who are in our show here that are Christian, people who become Christian, and there are people who might be secular and people who might have different kinds of points of view. So this is important to look at. So we can see why they decided to leave Islam. Some said they disliked organized religion. Some said they didn't believe in God, and some said that they weren't religious. And then it doesn't say a lot of people did, but this is an interesting thing too. Cited as reason specific to their experience with Islam being raised as Muslim. So about like 9% and then 7%. So this is the kind of things that we see within Islamic tradition. One striking difference between former Muslims and those who have always been Muslim is those who hail from Iran. Those who have left Islam are more likely to be immigrants from Iran than those who have not switched faiths. The large number of Iranian former Muslims is a result from the spike immigration form in Iran following the revolution in 1978 into 79. Most converts to Islam were raised Christian. So this is another interesting thing. Like we could see a lot of people. So this is an interesting question. So you have a lot of ex-Christians who become Muslims, and then you have ex-Muslims who become Christians. So this is an interesting kind of crossover to kind of examine and look at within this type of situation. Among those who have converted to Islam, a majority come from a Christian background. Half of the converts identify as Protestant before converting, and another 20% were Catholic. And roughly 1 in 5 volunteered that they had no religion before they converted to Islam. So this is kind of the landscape. We're looking at this to look at the landscape and see how things are going. In recent years, the numbers of American Muslims has been growing steadily, about 100,000 annually. But the fact that the shares of people who enter and leave Islam are roughly equal suggests that conversions to and from the faith are having little impact to the group's growth overall. So there we go. I can stop sharing the screen.
Let me show something here, yes. Isa. I just pulled up because you mentioned Iran. Let's see here. Where did it go? Okay. And I'm not sure who's citing this, but I'm just sharing my screen real quick. If you look here, I'm going to have to make this bigger. I think you can't see that. Now, this is off of Wikipedia. I'm not saying Wikipedia is all that in a bag of chips, but here's the point that I want to make here. 2020 survey, an online survey. Okay, now it's important to understand the difference between surveying somebody in public and surveying somebody online. Somebody online is going to be more likely to say how they truly feel, or reply to a question how they truly feel, than what you would if somebody was in person. And the reason why is in Iran, well, you know, that they practice Islam there. And this is what practicing Islam has done to Iran. It's caused, let's see, 2020 found much of the percentage of Iranians identify as atheists. It's up to 8, almost 9% of the people in Iran are atheists now. And 22 identifying as not following an organized religion, and then 60% not identifying as Muslim. Now, if you go back and you take the temperature of Iran, 30 years ago, it was 99% Muslim, but now it's only 40%. And so the obvious question becomes, is what caused so many people to lose their faith? And I would say when you practice Islam in its purest form in the modern era, you are going to have this type of apostasy apostasy from it. People are going to realize that this is not something that is of God. This is something that has to be of, well, I think it's evil, in my humble opinion. Issa, you jumped off. I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to steal your thunder. Go ahead.
Yeah, I hear that. I think the difficulty too is we have certain interpretations of Islam, and it depends on the interpretation that we're engaging with and dealing with. And some interpretations can be really rough. Like we're dealing with a kind of, I would say, a crisis, like this Taliban crisis. You know, may they all be helped and supported the people in Afghanistan. You know, people pray for them and care for them and send support for them. But it's a terrible crisis. It's a really
Oh my God!
terrible
Did you see
crisis
that
that's going on.
C-17 yesterday? Have you seen the video of that C-17 yesterday rolling down the runway? I don't know if
Where they
you,
went into, they jumped onto the plane and they fell off because they wanted to escape this.
I mean,
It's
you can't. I mean,
extremely
you just
dangerous.
can't. Well, no, they were crushing people under the tires. If you're running those jet engines of a C-7, you have any idea how much power those? You get sucked into one of those things, it's going to, and they didn't
You're
care.
dead.
Yeah, right. And then they're still hanging on to this plane even after it takes off. Even after this thing takes off, and there's pictures of people falling off this aircraft while it's 200-300 feet in the air.
Yeah, you also notice that certain Muslim self-imposed imam is not on the next flight into Afghanistan to practice his religion or any of his
Of course
cohorts are.
not. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But everybody's
Hypocrisy
fleeing to get
all
away
the
from
way.
it.
Yeah.
Everybody
Hypocrisy
always
all
flees
the
to
way.
get away from the Sharia if they can.
Yeah, you don't see people jumping on a plane to go into that. You see people
Wanting to
and
jump
they're
out of
just
it.
desperate. I mean, these are the people that, of course, they were loyal or at least didn't have any opposition to the Karzai government or the American forces there. They know exactly what's going to happen to them. They're not stupid. They're going to get arrested and then they're going to be killed. Period. That they're not. This is what they do.
Well, we actually do see people, flying the other way. They're called the real mujahideen, the real soldiers of Allah. But I'm just saying, you won't see any of the internet ones do it. Just saying.
Even Mufti Mink, he does a video and he says the largest defectors is Islam. The largest defector is Islam. I got that video. Hijab cut it from his video, but I saved it right before he cut it out. I've got it.
It just breaks your heart. God, it just kills your soul. And then well, I'm not even going to the selfish, U.S. part of it, being humiliated. Who cares? The United States is big enough to take the humiliation. It's just that there's people there on the ground. All right, I'm sorry, you said. Yeah, let's go. My fault.
Cool. I wanted to add one thing too that I think is really important here. Is there's a reason why we have this element of separation between church and state and the religion and the state. The important part is religion is a personal practice. When you have a government that institutes the religion and doesn't allow people to have their own personal relationship with their Lord, you create a huge drama and you create, a lot of trauma. You create drama and trauma. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in these countries that are practicing their interpretations of Islam is that a lot of them, they all have different kinds of interpretations. Just that's an important thing we have to understand. They're not all the same. Iran does not have the same perspective as Morocco or, Persia or Egypt or Saudi. They're all very different. They all have different perspectives and they all have different ways that they view these texts and things like that. And whoever's in power, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is why we can't have this type of thing, because it's going to create an extreme danger for everybody. Because you take a country like Pakistan, also known as Pure Land, the majority are Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Sunni. That's mostly the kind of the critique that we see on the show are towards the Sunni tradition. Majority is that, but imagine if you're Shia, imagine if you're Qadiani, imagine if you're any other kind of cultural group, you're Hindu, Christian. It's extremely difficult and extremely hard. I understand completely the conception of Pakistan. The idea of Pakistan was to say, look, we feel that we're oppressed in India or Bahrat or, Hindustan. we feel oppressed, and we need to have a safe space for us. It's the same argument that Israel has too, which is kind of funny because a lot of
That's what
people don't
Pakistan
accept
was
that
created for
narrative.
in the first place. Pakistan was created in the first
So,
place to
yeah,
provide a safe space for the Muslims, and now they want to go back
sorry.
into India and then snivel about being oppressed. Well, you were given a country. This is why they partitioned the country in the first place, is because of this
Wow.
religious
Which I think is,
unrest.
I didn't know
which I think is
that.
deeply sad. Because
Oh yeah.
I
Mhm.
honor pluralism. I think we should have different perspectives and different religions. And it's fine if you want to share your faith with others peacefully, where you say, look, I believe this is my faith. I believe it brings me salvation, and I want to share it, and I want to have dialogue to share that. I think that space is cool, whatever religion. You want to be Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, whatever religion you feel that you want to share your religion and your faith, it has to be done peacefully. You can't have a space where there is, what's the word, coercion. You can't coerce people into faith. That to me is extremely terrifying. And even America, that's the project of America. This was supposed to be a safe place for people who are not following the religions in the European, like the traditional narrative in the European countries. This was a safe space to protect them. And if we are going to protect people, we can't then
Yes.
oppress people. Protection and oppression do not go hand in hand. And you have to give love, you have to give compassion. And it just, when I think of certain countries, when they're doing certain practices, I'm like, this is extremely dangerous. And I'm like, this ex-Muslim topic is so important to me because I am so worried about people who are in certain places where there's a majority of a particular faith. And, particularly, in a lot of these, Sunni majority countries, the person says, I don't want to, like you have John Isaac, for example, who's present here, and you have Hussein, you have Adam Seeker, you have a lot of people who just are like, this isn't for me. I believe in Jesus. Jesus is my Lord and Savior. This is what I need in my life. I need this to be the full person I can be. And I don't think there's anything wrong for a person being able to have that. They shouldn't have 3 days where they have to repent. This is insane. This is madness. It's like some people say, well, this is okay because it's treason. I'm like, it's not treason. Because faith is a personal thing, and it's not, no government can tell you what to believe. That's your faith, and you have the honor and right to believe and have that faith. And that's the good thing about the project here in the United States. We need to have that. We must have
Western thought, right? But what we're doing is we're bumping up on two different civil cultures where you don't have that exceptions, that recognition of individual right, individual liberties. If you look at the way it's viewed in Muslim majority country, it's obligatory. You have to believe. If you don't, well, then if you die as a non-believer, you're going to go to hell. So they have to punish you for not believing, to purge you of your sin of apostasy, so you will not be sent to hell. It's the sickest thing, and everything is predetermined, which is even sicker. We went to we were pulling out of a when we were in. We were outside of Baghdad, and we're convoying out, and there was a cart. A guy was driving a cart with a donkey, and his son was walking by the cart. And as the convoy is going past, his son came out on the wrong side of the cart, got hit, and was killed. And it was the most god-awful thing to see. But this is what really surprised me. I mean, this is what got to me. It was the amount of stoicism, the amount of the lack of any type of emotion from the guy. And we were talking to the interpreter, and I'm like, what the heck is wrong with this guy? And he goes, well, this is our faith. It was predetermined that he was going to die here at this time, and he accepts what Allah had predetermined for this guy, for this kid.
Maybe, hey, I've heard. Well, so I've heard stories of people going to Iran, and the driving is just horrible. There's like no driving laws, and they just get behind the wheel, and it's like Allah knows if I'm going to die or not, and they just fly crazy all over the place. No, seriously. The same way, I don't know, maybe you just gave a story in Iraq, but I've heard also other people in Iraq, they just cross the street that way. They just, just don't look left or right, and just like, if Allah's going to take me out, Allah wills it. I mean, it's just.
And this is. I mean, the reason I point that out is because that leads directly back to Isa's point, is that when you don't have that liberty, that individual liberty that we enjoy here in the West, this is what you get. Everything is predetermined. You have to believe a certain way, and if you don't, well, then you're going to hell. And in order to prevent you from going to hell, we have to kill you. We have to purge you of your sins. And it's just okay. Isa, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're totally fine. I was just thinking about that story you shared, and I was thinking the power of surrender. Like, surrender is really powerful if you have the choice to surrender. If that is your personal choice to surrender, that's a very powerful thing that you can have. You say, I surrender my life to the Lord, whatever term you want to use, Allah, God, the Tetragrammaton, whatever term you want to use, Hashem. You use this term, you said, I want to surrender myself to the Lord. I want to have that relationship, and that's really important for me. I think it's powerful if that's really your choice. And that's the question. Do we have the choice in these situations? And it's kind of tough. In liberal thought, there's this concept called toxic masculinity, right? And does that happen where you're not allowed to have emotions? Like, if someone dies, can you not grieve for them? What does grief look like? How can I sponsor grief? How do I sponsor mental health? These are issues that are really important. And when you have a homogenous society that doesn't necessarily consider those things, they say, go read hadith, read the Quran. These things will protect you and help you. And maybe they can. And maybe you need to have other means too. Maybe you might need a therapist. You might need to have these other means that are available. And I'm not sure all those resources are available in these spaces, because maybe that's not necessarily completely valued. It's like valued, take care with your family. The imam will help you. I think in these societies, I'm not saying go reject faith. That's not my point. My point would be, like, maybe these other resources need to be accepted. And it's really tragic. Like, even
what type of resources are you talking about?
What psychological resources? Having psychological resources for mental health and mental wealth. These types of things that are really important, that we'll take it for granted. We take it for granted here, these types of things. And one thing I want to also add is, you being in the military, it's hard being, like, let's say you want to be a Muslim chaplain, or you want to be a Muslim person in the military. Some people might condemn you for being a Muslim person in the military. They say,
well,
you're helping the
they
evil
stood up on
American.
a table and shot a bunch of people at a PRP, and another one fragged our command tent one night before we even rolled up into Iraq. So the experiences with Muslims in the military is, for me, it's kind of a touchy issue. Even though I knew Muslims I served with Muslims, and they were just accepted and trusted. But after that night, it was in Kuwait. We were still in Kuwait, and just as soon as they issued, the ammunition and your full battle load, my mind kind of changed about that. Can you serve with somebody who is a Muslim in the military, and you're fighting other Muslims, if they hold those views that that guy did that night? And I think that would have to be something that the people in the military really need to look at, because let's face it, if you're a Muslim and you're in the army, you are a very valuable asset to the Americans, because number one, you know the faith of these people, and so you know what their tendencies are, and what they believe, and how they may or may not react to certain situations culturally, or religiously or whatever. But at the same time, you have to be able to trust. When you're in the military, you have to be able to trust that guy sitting in the foxhole next to you. If you can't do that, then there's something wrong. Now,
You're screwed.
Would it be something wrong with me, by today's standards, to say, well, Kafir, there's something wrong with you if you can't accept, a Muslim serving, with you in combat in, let's say Afghanistan. Well,
they have a very different interpretation. I would say Muslims. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go
I'm
ahead.
just kind of thinking out loud.
I was just saying that,
what I experienced.
I think Muslims who are from, in America, who go and serve in the military, it's a big sacrifice that they're doing when they come into this situation, because you're going to have probably other Muslims who are going to say you're bad people. Who are going to say there's something wrong with you. You're supporting America. There's these problems with this. This is a very difficult situation to engage with, being a Muslim in the military. And And that would be a hard conundrum that you would have to deal with if you're a Muslim in the military. How do you engage with forces who might be Muslim too? What do you do? But in the reality, it's like when you join the military, you have that relationship with the military. So this is what I've made an oath. I'm connected to this, and I guess if you do, let's say you did something that would be anti-Islamic, you would have to figure that out with Allah. You would have to have a conversation.
One of the biggest concerns that they had, one of the biggest concerns that Muslims had was being captured. What would happen to them? Let's say they captured me, and they captured somebody that was in my company that was Muslim. For me, they would you're an infidel, and we'll kill you. But they'll take that Muslim and they will torture him. They knew that their treatment would be much worse for a Muslim fighting a Muslim on the side of
the kafir.
Well, an infidel force, okay, a force that's not Muslim.
You would be considered a munafiq, a hypocrite. It would be very bad. And that's the thing. Sure. It's very hard to be a Muslim chaplain, or be a Muslim military serving member, because it's not going to be easy for you. People are going to judge you. And, you have and it's the thing is, like, as I said before, I do believe in the polythic narrative. You're going to have a different narrative of Islam. You're not going to have the same narrative as the people that you're engaging with, because if you're a Muslim in America, you're going to believe in freedom. You have to a certain degree, you're going to have to believe in freedom, because that's a part of being a Muslim American. Like you have that identity as being American. And it's an interesting thing. What is this conversation of being a Muslim American versus being like a Muslim born in Pakistan and Egypt? It's a different conversation. And I think Western Muslims, they have a very different relationship. And it would be an interesting question, because a lot of people might, what is that word called? They're like, they hurrah stuff. They're like, oh, I believe in the Muslims in other countries. And I'm like, but you're an American Muslim. You go to those you're not going to fit in. You fit in here in America. You're not going to fit in Afghanistan. You know what I mean? Because the culture is different. The way they practice Islam is different than the way you practice Islam. Some people don't know the diversity of Muslim beliefs, but some Muslims believe that you can't watch movies. Movies are haram. Music is haram. Like dance is haram. And then for some Muslims, everything's okay. As long as you don't eat pork, you're good. Like if you have sex and you're not married, that's all right. But if you eat pork, that's a bad thing. Like that's usually the line that's drawn. If you eat pork, you're in trouble. Like, you're gonna eat pork.
And then we're starting, Iowa. Like every other house is a pig farm too, so they'd have a hard time living in Iowa.
But that's the thing. Like eating pork is.
That's we want Kenny to come to the pig farms. Just saying, because he knows all about the swine and the humankind.
Yeah,
he'll fit right in, dude. He's the head.
Out there wandering around in it. All right, go ahead, Issa. Sorry.
The thing I would say is that a lot of us might take for granted what we have in America. Like a lot of people are like, look how horrible America is. Look how they treated African Americans. Look how they treated Native Americans. Look at the Japanese internment. And all this stuff is true. These things were terrible things and atrocities in America's history. And we grieve and honor all these people who've suffered. We grieve and honor all these people who've suffered.
Did you know, Issa, that history teachers today try to repress all of that history of the African American experience with slavery? We don't try to teach that. The Japanese internment, no, we keep that secret. All of the Jim Crow laws and the discrimination, we don't let our children know that, according to some people.
Sad.
It really is.
And
it's sick. This is what makes us different. This is what makes us different, is that we do teach that, and to our kids, and we do emphasize how wrong it was, and we do say, look, we are a great country, and the reason why we're a great country is because we are able to change and to overcome those things that we did.
Yes.
If we were not a great country, we would be sweeping down the rug, trying to keep it quiet. We would try to say, hey, Muhammad didn't really do that. We would be doing things like that. But we live in an open society. And so we do.
And I think it's very important to wrestle with these things. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just like, if you have a person that you find to be divine and you care about, and you say this is the person who's the transmitter, is the prophet, Nabi, Rasul, If you'd say, I am like, you take the Sunni, Ahl Sunnah Sunni tradition and say, I believe in these Sunni hadith, I believe in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, I believe in the Riyadh al-Salihin, Al-Tabari, Ibn Ishaq, I believe in all this corpus of knowledge, then as a Muslim, you need to do due diligence. Like, that's one thing that really bothered me. I have had Muslim education, and there was a lot of whitewashing, and I'm like, this is not correct. If I think to have real faith, you've got to wrestle these things. If you want to deal with this, you got to say, look, I'm a Sunni Muslim. These are very hard things that I see in front of me. I've got to engage them. And it's the same thing like of any faith. Like, we've talked about this on the show with Christianity. Like, we see things in the Hebrew scriptures that are tough, like the killing of all the Amalekites. How do you deal with that? You've got to wrestle with it. You can't just say, it never happened, it doesn't exist, I'm going to whitewash it. And that's the weird thing that I see with The Message, Arisada. You had the DVD. It looks very pretty and nice overall. It looks like it's a well-polished movie. You know, it looks like an epic like Ben-Hur, and it's from the 70s, I think. And it looks really polished, and it creates a very sympathetic view. And I would say the stuff that it says isn't untrue. It is true, but it's selectively true. It's not looking at the entire story, and that to me is problematic. I'm like, there are problematic things here that we need to engage. Is this situation with marriage with a younger person? Like, some Muslims will engage that, and they'll be like, some like, no, she wasn't that age. Some will say, yeah, she was. He was a person of that time. There's different. I think that's a healthy thing. You got to at least engage it. You can't pretend it doesn't exist. And to me, that's the problem. Like when we saw Madam Linda Sarsour, when she was being presented before, I was like, you are saying correct things. They're not completely false, but you're not looking at the whole picture. And then when you're presenting this picture, it's not the full picture, and thus you're going to get a skewed image of these things. And I'm like, I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair to you. It's not fair to your faith. I think in your faith, you have to struggle with difficult things, because if you don't, then you don't. There's a Hebrew word. It's called imuna, faith, right? Or they say iman in Arabic. Having that faith, you've got to wrestle with these hard things. If you want to be a devout Christian, you got to be like, whatever's hard in Christianity and is difficult for me in Christianity, I am going to wrestle with these things because I really believe in Christianity. These are tough things, but I will get through them. And I'm like, that's important. I think whitewashing is just not a good situation. And I think this ex-Muslim topic is one of the problems. I'm like, if someone says, I don't believe in Islam, and maybe they might be hostile. They might say, look, I think it's terrible. I'm hurt. Particularly, I've seen this with ex-Muslims from countries with Muslim majorities who have very strong passions. I understand their passion. Their passion is coming from this extreme pain and trauma that their own identity is being invalidated. I can't speak for John Isaac, but I would believe
that's the question. You know,
I mean, the overarching society is invalidated. The overarching society is invalidated. Well, I mean, let's say if you took Egypt, for example.
Would American society invalidate who they are if they apostatize? Would they have issues here in the United States? All right, so would they have issues?
I don't think so.
If they went to France, would they have issues apostatizing from Islam?
No.
Okay, so if they went to, let's say, Turkey, would there be issues of them apostatizing from Islam? Would there be an element
it would be more problematic. It would be more problematic.
So if you went to Saudi Arabia, would you definitely have problems? Okay, what about Egypt?
You're probably going to go to like conversion camp, huh?
Okay,
Egypt would be bad too.
The further west you go, the easier it is for you to apostatize and be accepted, not only by society as a whole, but also there's examples of family members. You know, they don't completely ostracize you like they do in countries where they can't kill you. For example, like in Turkey, if you apostatize in Turkey, I don't know if they enforce the death penalty in Turkey. However, you're completely rejected by your family if you apostatize. If you go to Egypt, John Isaac, let's get John Isaac in here. John Isaac, are you there? There he is. Yep. Oh my goodness, yeah, John. Okay, so if you apostatize in Egypt, what happens to you?
Look, the government doesn't have in Egypt apostasy law. We don't apply the Sharia law completely in Egypt. We have some things we apply and others we neglect. But family, if they know, they will ask you to return back 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, maybe months. After that, if you are like you are married, they will force you to divorce your wife, and at the end you should leave your country, Egypt, and go to any other place. We have many cases like that. We have case for a doctor, a professor in the university, who was married to a well-known another professor in another university. Whose name was Nasser Hamid Abu Zaid. He is very known Islamic scholar. And after some time, he apostates and left Islam. It was like 30 or 25 years ago. And Al-Azhar in Egypt made a case in the court to divorce him from his wife. And Azhar won, and they forced him to divorce his wife. At the end, both of them, Dr. Nasser Hamid Abu Zaid and his wife, left Egypt and go to Netherlands, and he died in Netherlands. Then this is what happened. There is no punishment, capital punishment law in Egypt for anyone, but you lose all your your advantages in the country. They will let you they force you to divorce your wife. They will they may kick you out from your work. They may kick you out from your house. Then people
you lose basic privileges and rights if you
yes, all human rights that he had before as a Muslim. No, you lose everything.
Okay, let me ask you a question about the divorce piece. You say, okay, so if I'm a man, I'm Muslim, my wife's Muslim, and I apostatize from Islam, we're automatically divorced according to the law. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because no Muslim women can marry except to a Muslim man.
Right. Okay. Now
he now is not Muslim.
Right. Okay. So now let me ask you this then. Let's say I'm a Muslim man and my wife apostatized. Does that cause a divorce? Are we automatically divorced then?
No, not divorce, but the children, as a matter of making pressure on the woman, they take the children from the woman and they kick the woman out from the house.
Okay.
Yeah, before I had Alan, my ex-husband was saying he's going to be Muslim, and I said he's going to be whatever he wants to be. This is before I was born again, but I did not agree to that at all. But he said it. So, what John said is true. They see their children as Muslims because they're Muslims, which is just ultimate captivity even before they're born. Spiritual captivity.
There was a movie that was made. I've mentioned this a couple times with Sally Field a number of years ago. Not Without My Daughter. If you guys ever get a chance, I don't know if you have seen that, but if you get a chance to see that, it's just an absolutely phenomenal movie and the portrayal of how women, just like Connie, marry Islamic men, and then the Islamic men take them back to their country. What happened was she married a Muslim doctor, and then they had the Iranian Revolution, so he feels that he has to go back. So he goes back there with Sally Field, his wife, and their daughter. And now she can't go back to America and take her daughter with him. So he makes the daughter stay there in Iran because under Islamic law, the man has control over the wife, especially if the woman, like Sally Field was still a Christian. She didn't convert. And it's a really good movie if you ever get a chance to watch it. I don't know if it's based on a true story or not, but it is a very compelling story. Okay, Isa, let's get back to you.
I'd like to add something before Isa. Just
okay. John, go ahead. John, go ahead.
There is something also in Egypt you should know. For example, a Muslim left Islam and he believed in Jesus as Lord and Savior, but he is not married. He is single and he wants to marry a Christian woman. He's now Christian, but he's coming from Islam and wants to marry a Christian woman. The church itself refuses this marriage because if the church does this marriage, there is a certificate for marriage in the church, this will make a lot of problems for the church itself. They may burn the church. Then the only solution for this guy is that he should leave Egypt, go to any other country, and marry there and live there. It's not allowed, even if you left Islam secretly. but the church doesn't accept this marriage. This is just elected to fate.
Okay.
Wow.
All righty, John. Yeah, and we've been in the chat. Wadu, of course, Wadu is saying you need to check the new laws in Egypt. I think maybe you two ought to have like a private communication on whatever that means.
Hey, Eric.
Yes. Hi, Chris.
Hey,
Great
how you
live
doing?
stream today. I mean, it started out really good. You had some great guests on there, but
I had two wonderful guests on there, honestly. I had you and Dr. Kufophobia.
Yeah.
We actually had a really good live stream on my channel. But yeah, everybody just ignore the troll. What do Muslims know in the chat? He's just a troll.
okay, thank you.
Agreed.
Okay, Isa. All right,
Sure.
back to what you were saying.
Yeah, I think that is a tragic situation, and I've heard those horror stories. Honestly, it's just traumatizing. It's really traumatizing that. I really have to be on. I have to be honest. I really appreciated what you said, Connie. You said, "I want my son to choose what faith he wants to be in," and I would say, even in Christianity,
Yes,
I think that's a
sir.
very important thing. That if you want to be born
Of
again,
course, you can't
because I've
push
heard
nothing
like
on
most
it. Hmm. Yeah, you're right.
most
Even if
stories
I
that
was
I've
born
heard,
again at that time, there was no way that I could have. You can't push if you can't, you just can't. God saves the people. We lay the foundation, and then God does it. So yeah. Hmm.
and I think that's a part of parenting. I'm not a parent myself, but but if I were to be a parent, that'd be very important for me. Is that my child would have to be able to choose what their faith is. I can't force them to be a particular faith because that's their relationship with God.
Hmm.
Because if I force
Hmm.
them, then that's fake. It's artificial. It's not real. And if we take like a framework, like a Christian framework, salvation through Christ, you have to willingly take that choice. You can't just say, well, I'm going to manipulate you. I'm going to make you do this. I'll give you candy. I'll make you do. No, you have to make that choice. And I think that's a very terrifying thing that I see in a lot of narrative, is this thing where people are like, well, you're born this. You need to do this. And I'm like, no. Like something that actually bothers me a lot is circumcision. The Islamic circumcision is a little bit different than the Jewish circumcision. So a lot of people think, oh, the Jewish laws are exactly the same as the Islamic laws. They're kind of different. They're similar, but they're different. So in the Jewish laws, you're supposed to be 8 days old when you get circumcised, because the circumcision relates to Yitzhak or Isaac, right? And for the Muslims, it's Yishmael or Ismail, and he was around maybe 7 to 13 years old. So in some communities, Muslim young boys are getting circumcised around 8 to 13 or 7 to 13. That to me is very problematic,
Ouch.
especially anesthesia. And I'm like, these are things that. So to me, I'm a person who definitely believes in any kind of reformation to make things more civilized. I'm like, this is a problem. And I've heard parents tell me, they're like, I saw my son getting circumcised. And I'm like, this is the custom and this is what we do. But I was so traumatized by it. And I'm like, that's hard. That's a very, very painful thing.
Do you know why
So it depends on the Muslim.
the Jewish law calls for circumcision on the 8th day, Isa?
I thought it was aligned with it was connected with Yitzhak. But you tell me more. Tell me what you.
Well, if you
what
look, and
understanding.
this is there's God in this. When a child is 8 days old, this is when his system, his body, creates the most vitamin K. He has the most vitamin K in
Yay.
his
I was
blood,
hoping you'd say that. Hmm.
and vitamin K is a blood clotter. It is one of the chief components of
Hmm.
blood clotting. And so, if you circumcise a boy at 8 days old, he's going to have the best chance of clotting and not having a lot of issues with bleeding. And it's just kind of odd that the
Exactly.
Mosaic law would call for, circumcising young boys on the 8th day, when that actually happens to be the exact day that they have the best chance of the blood clotting and healing the fastest. But that's just science. Sorry, I used to teach
Yep.
science.
Yep.
Well, that's very helpful. Yeah, I didn't know that. So you just taught me something new. That's something I didn't know.
Well,
So
why
I
didn't you come
appreciate
to
that.
my
Thank
class?
you.
I mean, what the heck is wrong with you? Colleges in the east there. You should have come. You should have come up here into Iowa, and I would have sat you in the front row.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's a bit of a hike to get to Iowa. Captain Kirk is from Iowa, if you know, from Star Trek. But
William Shatner.
So,
We're not bragging on that.
Land
Hold on a
lover,
second.
right?
Hold on. Johnny Carson is from Iowa.
Oh, yay.
Ronald Reagan's first radio show
Oh, I
was
love
at
him.
ABHO out in Des Moines. And we have all kinds of other people from Iowa that I'm not going to go into. We brag on that because everybody is from Iowa. Nobody stays around here and lives here. They leave, and they're always from Iowa, and they become famous once they leave. Sorry. All right, go ahead.
funny.
Go ahead. I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
No,
I got my mouth shut.
I think that's totally fair. I think my position, as I usually am, is like, what's the most ethical thing we can do for society? And I think about the situation with like Sati. I always bring up Sati and Ram Mohan Roy, and he also worked with a preacher named William Carey, and there was a cohort of people that said we must abolish this practice. Just like, depending on your interpretation of the Murtad law, I'm not taking Mohammed Hijab's position or some scholar's position that would say you get excommunicated from society. I'm not taking that position, but the position that people say that they should be put to death, because there's multiple positions which will come out. I think you could take a scholarly position to argue the other one, but if we argue this one, I think it has to be abolished. Like, there's just no ands, ifs, or buts. Like, I don't care if it's corruption in the land. If
Okay, so what do you mean by different positions? When you start talking about the different positions, can you let's be a little more clear on this? I mean, what ultimately is the punishment for apostatizing from Islam? If you are going to enforce a consistent application of the law, a historical application of the law, what is the punishment?
Yeah, I think that's what you added there is an interesting point. Is what's the historical application? Yeah, I would say probably qadis and amirs, because I actually did this. I read a book called because I was studying the prophetic biography. There was a text called Faiz al-Tafriqi, and it was talking about this gentleman who basically was joking around, and he said, "May the leather piercer pierce the sky." He said something like that. He was joking about raining, like he's just having fun, right? But someone heard him saying this, and he got in trouble for it. So he actually got brought to court, where they were like, the qadis were kind of delegating what happens to this person. Did he commit blasphemy? Did he commit against God? And when I read this, I was like, oh my God, this is really heavy and hard. And I was sharing with my peers, I'm like, I'm wrestling with this because like, I am not comfortable with this. And a lot of people, like, we understand, but we kind of just kept moving forward. And I'm like, this is extremely hard for me. Like, I'm not comfortable with this. And basically what happened was half of the scholars said, look, no, he's joking. We know him. He's a good person. We don't want this to happen. And then there was another contingency that's like, no, this guy needs to be put to death. So then it got brought to the Amir, and then the Amir basically settled it and said, look, he's getting put to death. And maybe like a crucifixion, because that was a practice that some did. He's getting put to death, and the scholars who ruled for him are going to be removed. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so tough. This is so hard. Like, it's cruel. And I'm like, I can understand why people might argue, because you're like, I want to have social stability. And that's what maybe a philosophical, ethical argument for this could be, is that we're going to have social stability. If we don't have, if there are people who are challenging Islam and doing these things, you're going to create social divisions. But I'm like, to me, that's a good thing. Like, I actually think that's a great thing, because if your faith isn't challenged, then what good is your faith? I don't see any purpose to faith if you can't be challenged. If you don't have people who are externally saying you're stupid, whatever you believe is dumb and is wrong, and you can keep going back and saying, no, I have to trust my relationship with God. I have to build this relationship. Doesn't matter what the world says. My relationship with God is greater. I'm like, that shows true faith. But if you have a faith where it's like, basically the government tells you what to think and what to believe, and if you go against what that government says and they hurt you, I'm like, that's not real faith. That's fake faith. That's fake. It's artificial.
Yes.
your faith has to be tested. You have to be tried. And I go back to you can go to the Hebrew scriptures and you can look at Daniel, one of my favorite prophets. Daniel is in Babylon, and he's in the Persian Empire, because they got kidnapped. Like after like the Jeremiah era, they get kidnapped and brought to the Babylon captivity, and eventually the Persian king takes over. It's a whole wild story, but basically what happens during the prophet Daniel is there's this test that gets brought out, because these people are not happy with them and they want to get rid of them because they believe in God, right? Instead of believing in the Persian element, they believe in the Hebrew teaching. They believe that there's this one God will protect you. So there's what's his name, Shadrach, Abednego, and Meshach. You have these three guys, and you have Daniel, and these three guys. They said, we're not going to bow down. We're not bowing down to the Persian emperor. We bow down to God. We don't bow down to the Persian emperor. So they said, oh, you're not going to do that? We're going to throw you in the fire. And it didn't matter, because even though they were in an empire where they were going to be put to death, their faith was stronger than that. And I'm like, that's powerful to me. And then Daniel, it was like a similar story, because he couldn't either. He's like, I have to pray to God. I can't pray to this thing because I don't believe it's real. I have to pray to God. And they were going to try to put him to death too. And I'm just like, this is powerful, because that's what real faith is, where when you're baptized by fire, I guess that's the term, right? You get baptized by fire. Yeah. Then you see when the person's real faith is out there. It's not real faith if everybody says, I believe, and if I don't believe, I get hurt. That's not real faith. That's fake.
Right.
It's artificial. Yeah. It's not real. So I'm like, to me, that's sick. When governments
the same thing as love. Yeah. You try to coerce love. You can't coerce love. That's just something that naturally flows.
It's not real love.
With faith. It's something that, it's not real love if it's coerced. And same thing with faith. It's not real faith if it's coerced. We had a guy in the chat. Let's see. I don't want to mispronounce the name. Mahmoud Hafiz. We should not leave, or I'm confused of what the topic is here. I don't know if you're leaving your faith or leaving the show. We're talking about apostasy and the consequences of apostasy on Muslims who leave their faith. Right now, I want to get to something else. If Isa would just hurried it up. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. There was just a lot of other things that I think.
I mean, there's all kinds of things that, and I like the depth in which you're going with this. I really do. I enjoy it.
I thought we could look at another article.
I was hack their heads off. Go ahead.
I was thinking this might be an interesting article we could look at. This is from 2020, and I think it'd be helpful, because I think we should look at scholarly articles and see what their opinions are. We're not looking at opinion articles of, like Google 1, 2, 3, like real, like kind of legitimate articles. I think are better to engage with in this heavy topic. So this one is from the Wall Street Journal. What does it mean to leave Islam? And when Muslims leave the faith, that's the name of this. So I'm going to read this and we can look at it together. And I think we can engage that, which I think is important. Let's see.
Lag time is not a good thing for live streams, so you got to be ready to roll this thing out just as soon as you know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go.
It's okay.
So here it is. When Muslims...
I had this sign. I was going to use it for the show, but that's okay. Go ahead.
One open apostasy can be dangerous, but those who risk it have an impressive reach. So this is something I hear a lot for people who are ex-Muslims, because this is something that I do in my public advocacy, is like, I advocate for free speech, as everybody knows here, and this is free speech. People are going to have different perspectives, and if you don't like their perspective, you can challenge them. But you don't throw them away because they have a different point of view, and that's, you have to have love whether you disagree. You could say, I have my faith, and I'm not going to hate you for having a different faith, but we can't hurt people for that. Conversions involving Islam sometimes look like a one-way street in the West. So this is something we were talking about. Famed new believers like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Keith Ellison seem to get all the attention, along with flamboyant flirts like Lindsay Lohan. But those who leave Islam may ultimately influence the faith more than converts do. There are about 3.5 million Muslims in the U.S., according to a 2017 Pew Research Center survey. The data suggests that about 100,000 of them abandon Islam each year, while roughly the same number convert.
So hold on, stop. Go back up. What is it? Say that? 100,000 of what? 3.5 million. I didn't know it was that high. Wow. Okay,
So
go
I think
ahead.
it's important that we look at scientific data. You're completely fine. We're having a conversation here, of course. In scientific data, like we have this idea that Islam is the greatest moving religion, and I'm like, we have the data here. This is just not factual, because it's not putting into context people who leave Islam. So there are people who, and I think that's the important thing. It's like we have to accept people are going to leave religion and come into religion. You got to find what fits your heart, what you feel your soul connects to and resonates with. And that's the most important thing. If your soul resonates and connects with Christianity or Islam or whatever, that's what you've got to do. You can't have like this story about, well, look how many Christians there are. That makes Christianity great. I'm like, that's like just a fake narrative. Who cares about that? That doesn't show the validity of Christianity. Christianity would be valid if there's only one Christian that exists in the entire world. You know what I mean? The invalidity, that's not validity. I think it's a weird logical argument that people try to do. Look how many people are coming. That means it's good. Like, that's not a fair argument to that. But continuing. While roughly the same number convert to Islam, although nearly a quarter of those raised in the faith have left, with the Iranians disproportionately represented. Similarly, trends prevail in Western Europe, where conversions in and out of Islam appear roughly to balance out. In the U.S., ex-Muslims' motives for leaving vary. Asked what their main reason was for no longer identifying as Muslim, Pew found 25% had general issues with religion, and 19% with Islam in particular. Some 16% said they prefer another religion, and 14% cited personal growth. More than half of them abandoned religion entirely, and 22% now identify as Christian. Apostates challenge their former faith in three principal ways: publicly leaving, organizing with other ex-Muslims, and openly challenging the Islamic message. I'm sorry, this thing doesn't have all of it, so I'm just going to read this last thing here. Overtly, apostatizing is a radical act that can lead to execution in some Muslim-majority countries, including Iran. Even in the West, apostates often meet rejection by families and friends that can turn violent. Accordingly, conversions out of Islam tend to be cautious or hidden, as in the case of the British author Salman Rushdie and pop star Zayn Malik, who's from One Direction. So this is kind of the idea. This I'm going to stop sharing now. But this is kind of what we're talking about that's really important to think about. How do we look at these type of situations? What are the consequences if someone does leave Islam? Like, why does someone have to cover their face? Like, John Isaac can't just publicly be out there, or Adam Seeker. This is something that really bothers me to a deep degree. I'm like, people are like, it's okay to don't ask, don't tell. Like, that's the argument people say. They'll use the don't ask, don't tell clause. I'm like, no, that's not okay. If we have freedom of faith, there's no don't ask, don't tell. It's that you have freedom of faith or you don't. So if you publicly believe that Jesus is your Lord and Savior, you're not going to agree with Islam. You're going to have, even a very liberal leftist Islam may not be accepted either. You'll say, well, I accept you as a religion that exists, or let's say an Islam that people might call moderate or more open-minded, and sees, Prophet Muhammad as a person who cares about people and, has treated people well. And that's the interpretation. Using sources, maybe you might call it cherry picking. I don't know. That you create this type of Prophet Muhammad that's very kind and compassionate. Even if that were the case, certain people say, that's not my faith. I don't agree with that. I have my own faith. I have my own way of believing. And this, even though I see your faith and I can understand why people might like it, it's not for me. This is my faith here. I think that must be open. That space has to be open, because if you don't have true faith, you don't have openness of faith, you don't have true faith. You'll have only artificial and fake faith. You'll have people who are going to be parading around. You'll have people who have mastered the Quran or mastered the Torah or mastered the Evangelion. You master these texts, but they don't know anything what it really means. They do it because people will like them for doing it. People will say, oh, you're such a great person. You're so amazing. You can recite these things. That makes you great. But that's not true. It's inauthentic. And the thing is, as long as you have absolute control, you're not going to have authentic faith. You just can't. It's going to be impossible, in my opinion.
When I can, may I?
Go ahead.
Okay, it's like my son, I had said when I was a heathen, it's whatever he chooses. But the fact is it's like with your children, you teach them, okay, and you tell them, if you cross that street and you don't look both ways, you might get ran over. So you lay the foundation, like God says, you teach them when you're going out, when you're coming in, when you're laying down, you teach them the Word of God, and then they make that decision. But you have to lay a foundation for them. See, that's the big difference, Isa, with me. Okay. Do you understand that?
Oh, I completely understand, but that's a very different
Yeah.
story. You're saying, look, I'm your guide as your parent. I'm the guide as your parent. So this is what I see to be true. So I'm sharing what I see to be true. But if the person says, I don't agree with that, I don't think you would say, okay, you need to be put to death now. You'd be like, I'm going to pray for you to be saved. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would think that would probably be where you would go with it, as opposed to being like, I will never talk to you again. I will never have you in my life again.
Of
I will
course
never even.
not. I love my son. I'm in it. I'm involved with my son. He's 34. Yeah, there is no way I would sign on that dotted line, for his
And at this
death.
moment, he practices God, right? Is that true or not?
I'm sorry, you broke up on my side.
Oh, sorry. Does
that
he
again?
practice Islam at this moment?
No,
Does he?
he's like what we call the modern Muslim. He has
Okay.
no idea what Islam is, Isa. No idea. I asked him,
So
"Do you
he takes a.
study Islam?" He says, I'm negative too.
So he identifies as a Muslim but doesn't know anything about it and refuses to study anything about it?
Exactly.
Well,
He
there's a lot of
hates
Christians.
reading.
There's a lot of Christians
He
like
hates
that
reading.
too. Yeah,
There are. Oh boy, there are.
Yeah, there's all kinds of
Mhm.
Christians like that too. I mean, you just can't, say, "Oh, those Muslims." He doesn't even believe that, But there's Christians like that too. Okay, I wanted to take a step in a different direction, and I appreciate Isa presenting us all with that. But this step is okay. So we're talking about what happens to Muslims if they apostatize and the social implications of that, the cultural implications, the family implications, and it could also extend into the economic implications of that, being ostracized from your family, being ostracized from certain types of jobs, things of that nature. But what I want to do is I want to take a look at, okay, what if a Christian apostatizes from Christianity and becomes a non-Christian, becomes an agnostic, becomes an atheist, or becomes a Muslim, becomes a Hindu, becomes a Buddhist, or whatever? How is that person treated by their family on average, I guess?
Like a publican, like a tax collector. People collect taxes from us all the time. We're not going out there doing jihad upon them.
Okay, so we wouldn't completely automatically, as a cultural norm, ostracize somebody from the family. And
Scripture says if a believer wants to go, let him go.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
simple.
Exactly.
What does light have to do with darkness?
I don't really want to bring. Well, I'll bring it up. I have a brother who has walked away from the Lord, and it pains me. And I know it when my mom was alive, it really pained her. But this never stopped me from treating him as my brother, treating him, or loving him, loving his family, or anything of that. And his decision is, his faith is his decision, and we accepted that. Of course, we pray for him, we love on him, and we want him to come back to the faith and realize that there is salvation in Jesus Christ. But we don't punish him for it. And I think this is where we start looking at the clear difference between these two, the application of these two faiths. Now, I can't make a universal statement that all Christians, will love on their family if one apostatizes. That would be ridiculous to do that, because we're not monolithic, of course. But you can see, if you wanted to draw a stark contrast these two faiths and how the one is treated if they apostatize versus if a Christian is treated. There are no laws in Christianity for punishing people for apostasy. There are no laws in Christianity to kill somebody, more or less, or to there's no laws in Christianity to kill somebody for apostasy, let alone just, punishing them for apostasy itself. So there's
Or
really
Jesus would have done that on John 6:66, and he did not. Would you go also? John 6:66, and they left Jesus.
Okay, and there's
Mm-hmm.
no punishment. And see, this is what
Mm-hmm.
people need to wrap their mind around. Is there a difference between these two faiths? Absolutely. Are these two faiths equal? Absolutely not. When one says that they'll kill you for leaving the faith, and the other says that they'll love on you to draw you back into the faith, you have two completely different ideologies. All right. Now let's go to the other two that I wanted to talk about, because we're quickly winding down here. We got about another 20 minutes. How do new Christians act or react to their new faith versus how do new converts, or what we call reverts to Islam, act when they encounter their new faith? And one thing that I would share from personal experience here is what happened last June. I mean, this is so it's so patently obvious what this faith system does to somebody's heart. It really is sick. Here you have Charles Doyle. He's a new convert to Islam, and when we had that live stream in response to what they did on Consider This TV, when they were talking about terrorism and supporting Hezbollah or supporting the people from Gaza, whatever. The new convert to Islam thought it was best to try to destroy me professionally. That was his reaction to what he did as a new convert. We must destroy this guy for speaking out publicly against Islam. Now, I would also say with that, why don't you go after somebody else also that's on the panel? And the only reason why they come after me is because I show my face. They have my name. They know where I am. If they knew where any of you other guys were, for like Rad, they know where you are. Everybody knows where you are. But I mean, if like John or Dr. Kufar or Connie, they would come after you. This is why I'm concerned with you, Isa. They have a good idea where you are located. So we might have to put you in the witness protectors program here pretty soon. I don't know about that. He's not listening. I don't know if he's listening to me or not. He's not listening. He's doing something else. Look at him. You're doing completely something else, aren't you?
No, I'm here. I'm present. I was listening. I hear you. But the thing is, like, what am I saying that's so terrible and bad? I'm just saying we need to have free speech. We need to have a conversation. And if there are difficult things, we need to wrestle with them. I haven't even convinced you. Haven't even
Amen, Isa. Amen. You are so right, Isa.
Granted, Isa's not calling Muhammad a scumbag on the show. That's true. I would agree with that. Okay, you did call Muhammad a scumbag for jumping on a 9-year-old.
Yeah, you're not breaking Islam.
But I mean, to just show somebody what their natural instincts are, just as soon as they convert. And I've pulled up all kinds of articles of people just as soon as they convert to Islam. They go out and start committing acts of violence. Now, why would they? And that's not just that's just not an isolated incident, but that is worldwide. I wouldn't say worldwide. Here, just saying here in the West, just as soon as people convert to Islam, they feel compelled that they now must go out and act violently. Where was the one where? This was, where did it go? This Florida. Let's see here. Is this it? Let's see, Florida teen murdered 13-year-old for mocking Islam. Family is suing the grocery store that sold him the knife. And it says here in the article, the 17-year-old was a recent convert to Islam. Now, what would give you the idea that would be okay, or that would be your duty to go ahead and kill somebody for mocking Islam as a recent convert? But it wasn't just him. Let's see here. The Oklahoma beheading, where that woman was beheaded at her employment. The guy cuts her head off. Here you have another recent convert cutting somebody's head off because they would not convert to Islam. What prompts people to do that? Why is this something that we see over and over and over again in Islam, but we don't find this in Christianity? Could
Because
it be
Islam is murder.
okay, because this is what we find in their teachings? You don't find these teachings in Christianity. I know they always like to go back to the Amalekites and the Old Testament, all this, that, and the other, all the while ignoring what the New Testament teaches as far as the New Covenant is concerned. They want to completely forget all that. But we don't see Christians going out and looking for Amalekites to kill, do we? We don't see Jews going out and looking for Amalekites to kill. Because one,
I have a question to ask you about that. I'm curious. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just want to ask you a quick question about the anti-Muslim position. I'm like, that's something that doesn't make sense if I would take a conservative traditional Islamic perspective. You need that. All that stuff is the same. It's not like people could say, well, the Muslims could say, well, we're just doing what the Hebrew prophets did. And I'm like, you could make that argument. And I'm like, well, why are you rejecting this and making it seem like it's false? You need this. It says in the creeds of Islam, you believe in the books, you believe in the angels, you believe in the day of judgment, you believe in all this stuff. So I'm like, well, this is a part of the books. Why would that be fraudulent? If God commanded to do this thing, what would be the problem? That's divine command theory. So I'm like, this is Islamic too. The Torah is Islamic. I don't see why Muslims would reject the Torah. You really can't, because most of the stuff you see in Islamic
Torah, any place where the Torah or the New Testament contradicts the Quran, then they reject that and they say, well, it's been corrupted, without offering any proof of that of those passages.
It's just a terrible science.
It's
a very bad
theology is what it is. It's ridiculous is what it is. But when you combine that, when you look at the admonitions to kill people in the Old Testament, these are descriptive. These are things that God told the Jewish people to protect his people. They're descriptive. You don't see an eternal admonition to go out and kill all of these tribes. You don't find that. Whereas if you look at the Quran, you're following the Sunnah of Muhammad. You're following his example. So when Muhammad had people killed for criticizing him, well, that is a pattern of conduct. That is something that they have to follow for all time. So this is when we see this episode in France with the Charlie Hebdo cartoons. They were criticizing and mocking Muhammad. You look at Theo van Gogh in, I think it was the Netherlands. I mean, the guy carved his heart out of his chest near in the middle of the street. Why? Because he made a movie mocking Muhammad. So this is prescriptive in the Quran versus descriptive as we find in the Bible, because it's following his Sunnah. And it's not just from the Quran, it's also from the Hadith. They follow the pattern, the conduct of Muhammad as they find in the Hadith. So if in the Hadith it says to kill those who leave their religion, that's a pattern of conduct to follow.
I think it's interesting because I think the Quran is a text that you can engage in a different way. Like, you could look at it completely metaphorically and you could pretty much avoid all of this stuff, but the Hadith is much more controversial. So if you connect yourself to the Hadith, completely, there's like 30,000 Hadith, by the way. There's so many Hadith and so many Hadith collections. Some of them repeat. It's pretty wild. There's a lot of Hadith. And I'm like, the Hadith science in itself is another story. But I'm like, if you are attached to these Hadith, you're going to face a lot of difficulty. Like, I think there's some good Hadith. Like, there's some nice Hadith. Like, be a good person, treat people well, help the orphan, help the poor. I think these are all great things. But then these things about, like, I don't know, like the idea of,
killing
kinds
those
of
who leave
things
their
about
religion.
like,
Yes.
and like dealing with people who do public lewd acts. These are things that are very problematic for me. Like, when I hear this thing, I'm like, this is just not okay. Like, if someone is gay or whatever, whatever term you want to use, and you say this is a disruption of society, well, why don't you learn how to love that person? Why would you want to throw them off the highest pillar? Like, when I read that, I'm like, that's sick. Like, I cannot get behind that. I just can't. I mean, I can understand, people trying to be true, but to the faith, but like that, that can never really connect with me. You know what I mean? I can understand pray 5 times a day, fasting, go to Jummah, whatever, all these things, you know, do Hajj. All those things are fine. I have no problem with that. But these things, yeah, I can't get behind it. Like, I can't get behind killing anyone. I believe that you have to have forgiveness. You know, you have to have forgiveness.
You are nigh unto the kingdom, O Dr. Isa.
Our friend Asana is in the Facebook chat. I'm not sure which page he's at, but I appreciate you coming, Asana. Jordanian Christian kills daughter for converting to Islam.
Wow.
I would ask a question to Hold on.
Yeah,
what's the percentage?
Hold on. Let me just ask the question. Let me just ask this question. What percentage of Jordanians are Christian? Let's just ask that one, okay?
Ooh,
hold on.
question.
Hold on. This is another.
I'm just wondering, did Asana go to Middle East? Did Asana visit Egypt?
Oh, good question too.
If a woman,
answer that,
a Muslim
Asana.
woman, want to convert to Christianity,
we all know him.
No way, she will not go out from the house.
Okay,
yes.
And you're probably right. And you know the thing is, everybody's gonna pile on Asana here. I like Asana because you know
he's got a great voice. He really does.
He's good at arguing. He's just sometimes he just gets so far off the reservation. You just like shut.
I want to ask you a question.
Let's see if he'll answer that question. For those two questions.
I'll let him.
I want to ask a question to Asana. I want to ask, because this is philosophy. I want to ask a question to Asana. Let's argue that that's true, that other faiths do this. I'm not denying that. I think that's definitely true. Faiths do that. The thing is, whether that's true or not, does that change the situation that people are being murdered in these situations and are facing these situations? The thing is, like, it's, if there's bad things, we need to go and engage that, instead of being like, well, look at how, like, you know, what do they call it? Passing the buck, where we pass the buck and say, well, that bad person did that bad thing, so let's be aware of them. They're just as bad as this. I'm like, no, if they're both bad, we need to condemn both. So if that person does that thing, that's wrong too. But that doesn't change that doesn't mitigate the other wrongness that's been going on. You know, and this is an epidemic. That's a problem that we must stand up against. And I think the whole Muslim community should be like, look, we must stop the apostate laws. We have to ban this. This is against human rights. And say, look, if someone attacks Islam, we have to do it in a kind way, in a compassionate way, in an empathetic way. We have to say, look, this is not okay in our community. We're not happy. You know, we're not happy with what these things are said. We're not going to be violent. We'll write a book. Like if someone says, I think the Prophet Muhammad is whatever, I think he's a bad guy, right? I write a book and say, no, I think he's a good guy, and here are my arguments why I think he's good. And that's say, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I said, I do that position. That's fine. Well, that's good. There's no problem with that.
Here's the thing. If you did that, would it be Islam? Seriously, it is so ingrained in this. Would it be Islam? Not only would it be Islam, but think, you would actually have to be killing the people who want to kill the apostates because they are that violent. I mean, you couldn't play around with that. Okay, because if you didn't, they'd definitely be killing you. They'd be blowing up your churches, your mosques, you know, whatever. Okay, so that's just kind of the problem with that. Well, that's the problem as I see it. You know what I mean? If you want to change these horrific laws, these things that are ingrained in Islam, then how can you say it's Islam? And if you're going to try and change it, well, people have tried to change it in Pakistan, and they've gotten killed for it. They've gotten blown up, shot, stabbed, and the people that have done it are considered heroes. You know what I mean? And that's my only point on that.
Yeah. Okay.
But we still have to wrestle with that. We got to wrestle with that. You know, that's a difficult situation.
Yeah, and you know, you can say it doesn't say in the Quran to kill people that mock Muhammad. This is true. There's a lot of things that it doesn't say to do in the Quran, like take the Shahada, or you know, all these other things that you know Muslims have to do in order to be Muslim. You find it in the Hadith. You know, I know people will say that the Quran doesn't say this, the Quran doesn't say that, but yet they'll follow the pattern of conduct that Muhammad set, that they found in the Hadith, because they know they cannot be Quran only. They have to follow what Muhammad did, because the Quran does say that Muhammad has set an example for you to follow. So to say that, well, it's not in the Quran, well, that's fine. It might not be in the Quran, but it's in the Hadith, and if Muhammad did it, it's okay. Like enslaving people, for crying out loud. The guy owned slaves, sold slaves, enslaved people. So that makes it okay. And this is why slavery existed in a lot of these Islamic countries all the way up until the 1970s, for crying out loud. And even today, in some cases.
Yes, even today.
Slavery is practiced today. So, all right, folks, we're going to call it a night. Thank you for coming. Everyone seemed to confuse Wahhabi. Okay, all right. Thank you all so much for coming. Isa, thank you for the presentation tonight. We appreciate that. You know, let's make sure that we keep people, these recent converts, away from Islam in our prayers, and also the people who convert to Islam in our prayers, that you know, that their hearts will not become so hardened, that they would still be willing to accept the calling of the Holy Spirit on their hearts, and to see the truth that only Jesus Christ, that what He provides us. Again, let's see. Jesus literally never condemned slavery. Well, Jesus never said that you shouldn't play lotto either. So I guess it's okay to play the lotto.
I don't think that was a part of Jesus' ministry. Jesus' ministry was primarily focused on hypocrisy.
I know. And this is why Asana just drives us all nuts. What he does is he goes like 30 different directions, and you're trying to catch him, and he's like, Asana, slow down. And he's like, no. So this is why we've had our...
It is called dishonesty. It is this dishonesty. We know that about Asana a long time ago. Is complete dishonest person.
Right, and you can see
he claims he was a Christian.
The level of frustration that people have with him. I personally like him because he gets hangry during Ramadan, and I've told him that I would send him a box of Snickers during the day, because he was on the show one time and he was just meaner than 80s, and I'm like, dude, eat some food. All right, everybody, we will see you Sunday, Crossing the Crescent, 2:00. Text me, IM me, send me any ideas that you have. I'm still leaning at going back to Mecca. Every time I say I want to go to Mecca and talk about how it wasn't there, we never get to it. We always got something else coming up. So if you can't come up with anything else, that's where we're going. If not, then we'll take a look and see what you have to say. God bless you. We'll see you on Sunday on the Crossing the Crescent discussion group.
All right. God bless everyone.
All right, you too. Bye now.